Okay.
I'm gonna see if I
Starting
can
at
get rid of seeing me because I know that that's gonna mess with me probably. Hide
yeah,
self view. Is that a thing? Okay, there we
yeah.
are. Hi.
Let me see if I could do the same because I do the same during meetings. I'm just like,
It's distracting. Like you're just like,
yeah.
and you don't want to like be looking at yourself, but you just kind of end up doing it. So yeah, this will be better. That's
Okay.
my dog. If you give me 1 second.
Okay.
Aaron, we started, so can you like, thank you. Okay.
How have you been?
It's been an adventure, let me tell you. I mean, I will be, I guess. Lot better, a lot better. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. And it's kind of it's I mean we'll get into it more, but I'll just say that it's an interesting feeling to feel like you got a new opportunity in life because of a major catastrophe that's caused so much harm and suffering. And we're not even out of it yet. But for me personally, having society kind of just shut down and having a chance to digest things has been very beneficial to me. Um, so it's yeah, I mean, a lot has happened like personally within the world, like since the last time I saw you, it's just, it's different. Everything's different, but yet somehow so much the same. So I
Mhm.
don't know. But yeah, so there's I don't know if that really answered your question, but yeah, I'm doing well. And since last time I saw you, I have figured out a lot about myself. So one of the things I'm going to attempt to do with you in this interview is what's called unmasking, because I have since figured out that I'm very confident in the fact that I am on the autistic spectrum at this point in my life, and that's been after like almost a year of research. And um, part of what I'm learning and realizing about myself is I've done this very classic thing called masking, which is when you learn how to kind of suppress your autistic traits, um, just to like not seem weird in front of people. um, and one thing that's been so amazing is I realized that I think part of the reason why I always felt the most comfortable in classrooms with teenagers, with students, was that I could be my more unmasked self. And, you know, there wasn't, what were you guys going to do about it? So part of it, like, I think added to the quirkiness, like, I will close my eyes a lot and I will talk with my hands and stuff. As students, I saw that part of me so much more than anybody else. Trying to remember something and like covering my eyes, trying to remember it. Students saw that side of me much more than like when I'm in a job interview or with, people, when I'm in a position where there's people above me that have more power. I hid that part of myself a lot more. So um, some stuff might not look completely foreign to you, but for me, kind of loosening myself up and allowing my body to do what it wants to do and be the most comfortable might look different to some people. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a very interesting concept. I was thinking about the same thing lately. Well, not with autism, but with other things, mostly with authority figures and trying to like hide yourself. I realized during this pandemic, I'm working more with older people, more like authoritative people, and I just shut down. Like I can't be myself. But people my age or like younger than me, so I'm just like maybe I should become a teacher because I'd be so much more comfortable being in a room full of little kids than in these meetings with these grown people. But yeah, that's like authorities to me personally, they're scary. Um, but I'm
I mean,
learning.
I'm still there, you know, I'm 41 years old and that hasn't gone away for me. And also too, it's weird to be at an age now where it's like, I don't know, like 40 is really interesting because um I feel like I'm like the youngest baby Gen X person or like the oldest millennial, depending on how you break it down. Um, since that's kind of like a framework that's really popular in society for people understanding like what history they've been through. Um, so yeah, like growing up, yeah, having that awkwardness with authority figures, that hasn't gone away for me at 41, but I'm at a weird spot where I am an authority figure for a chunk of people, which is kind of weird. But then also too, very much see myself like I haven't obtained what I was always told was adulthood growing up, which was like marriage and family and owning a house and stuff like that. Kind of that really stereotypical, um, just pre-planned package that we're offered, you know. And so like not achieving those things, I think has messed with a lot of people my age because what we're used to, like what adulthood is supposed to look like, it's been harder when you carry more student debt and you make less money, things like that. So yeah, being in this spot where, oh, I'm in a spot where I am an authority, like in a classroom, but yet I like it's you know it's been a long road to start feeling like oh I'm an adult too, and but I'm still freaked out by people in authority positions, which is weird now because sometimes I'm getting to into the age where like there's people that are younger than me that have like more authority than I do. So it's like I don't know it. And all the moral of the story of that is, yes, sir, it's weird. It's never going to stop being weird. But I love the idea of you being a teacher. I won't lie. I could
Yeah, I
see you
think
doing
yeah, people would think I'm thinking about changing my major because I'm like, okay, I like anthropology, but it's not really. I think high school me was like, I need to do something unique and different, and like I need to set myself apart. Um, but I'm just like, I gotta stop being stubborn and trying to like set myself different. Like, if I want to do something, I should go ahead and do it. And also like the stigma around being a teacher is like, oh, you can do anything and you choose a teacher, and it's like, but teachers, they're great people, and I don't think people realize like how much teachers do. Um, but yeah, that's something I'm like, oh my gosh, what would people think if because I went from like, oh, I'm going to be a biologist and I'm going to like do this and that. I was just like, well, being a teacher makes me happy, and I like teaching kids, teaching my little siblings. But yeah, I just hopefully that stigma goes away from teachers and teachers being undervalued because that's not who teachers are.
yeah, and I think too, like it's helps to have people of like obvious talent like yourself who has options to go many different directions to say no like that I want to be an educator because like you said in our culture, and it's not like this everywhere in the world, but in our particular culture here in the United States, for multiple reasons that I have strong opinions on, we look down on teachers and we look down on educators. And I don't know, it's like the saying, you know, like be the change you want to see in the world, you know, and there is something to people who could do other things choosing to do the thing that, you know, that might bring bigger paychecks, you know, big checks, big respect, big house, things like that. I mean, you're not going to get that with teaching, you know, you're just not. Um, but the rewards are so fantastic. Also, since we're just on this, I will give you kind of the advice if you're truly considering this, what I say to anyone who's considering teaching or is new to the profession. And my advice is do it as long as you're getting something out of it, because it will take everything from you if you let it. Um, and the moment it stops the moment it starts taking more than it's giving you, then it's time to start thinking about the next path or the next part of the path. Because the way, I mean, the way it's set up now, uh, if you don't have strong boundaries, but it's not, even if you have the strong boundaries, then you're just like, you can't get your job done, you know? So then if you take, so you could be like, I'm not going to answer emails after this time, and I'm not going to do any work on the weekends. Well, you're not going to get your job done, you know? So like, even when you're trying to have these strong boundaries, like you realize that, oh, like we're just being given an impossible task. Um, but that doesn't mean that the experience doesn't have value. um, I mean, for me personally, you know, teaching has taken as much as it's given in a lot of ways. um, and my, you know, my biggest hope for the next generation could be that we just really attract some of the best minds we have to the front of the classroom, because it's just my belief that if we actually focused truly on supplying like primo public education in every community, and we truly centered around supporting the human rights of children, that we could have great change in this country. um, I don't know, and part of me thinks like maybe this is why we do neglect our schools so much. This is why we do neglect our kids so much. um, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine a few weeks ago, and I brought up to him, I was like, you know, it's completely acceptable in our society to say, I hate kids. I hate kids. I can't stand kids. Oh, I don't want to be around kids. Kids are so annoying, blah, blah, blah. Insert any other group into those statements. And, you know, talk about any other group like that. I hate whatever. It sounds a lot different, but we're so used to hearing it in terms of kids that people don't even bat an eye. Like that's how invisible children are in our society. And like being a teacher too, being a childless educator, is a really interesting experience, because we have to train to work with you guys. You know, we have to learn about, you know, psychology and like all this stuff and best methods, and you don't have to do that for parenting, you know. So yeah, there's a I lost my train of thought, but yeah, I really do think that children are the most unprotected demographic, hands down, across the board, you know. And if we just focused on the rights of kids and making the world like structuring our society where kids have options to escape abuse. Kids don't go to bed hungry ever. You know, they don't go to bed cold ever. You know, that just that will bloom through the rest of society. So it's really interesting. Since I've left classroom teaching, Yusura, it is very common when people be like, oh, I don't know, you have that awkward small talk conversation with someone. Oh, what do you do? Oh, well, I was a teacher, but you know, I'm not teaching right now. I'm not in the classroom. 9 times out of 10, the person's like, oh, was it the kids? Was it the students? It's the kids, right? It's working with the kids. No, that's exactly what I signed up for. You know, like I know how teenagers operate. Like, you know, in fact, I prefer teenagers in a lot of ways because they're very straightforward people, which works with my autistic brain. Um, yeah, it's not the kids. So part of me makes me think like, how many people out there are having kids that then regret it? You know, because it's just such a weird it's such a weird response in my mind. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that a lot of times what people assume about you or what they say to you is just an insight into their mind, into their personality, you know? So when someone says, oh, it's the kids, isn't it? It's like, that's an insight into them, you know? So yeah, it's been very strange. But yeah, like kid hate is completely socially acceptable. And so I don't know. I will always be very defensive of young people, I think, because I really, you guys are the most unprotected group for sure across the
Yeah, I totally agree, which kind of leads into the first questions about expectations of growing up. Did you always expect to be a teacher? Like, how did you end up where you are?
I definitely did not always expect to be a teacher. In fact, it never was really one of those things I thought about like much when I was younger. Um, I was really into the idea of being a chef for a while. Like I think if I thought about like, oh, when I was little, what I want to grow up to be, it would be a chef. Um, but yeah, I don't. I guess maybe in high school, my art teacher had mentioned something to me. He suggested, he's like, oh, you should be a teacher. You have the perfect personality for it. And that was kind of the first little feedback I had ever gotten in that way. I'm like, okay, I don't know, whatever. And I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had so much brain fog growing up. Um, it was the 90s. School was not nearly as intense as it is now. So it was really very possible to just kind of like go through life not thinking about stuff very deeply, more so back then, I think. So yeah, I really didn't know um, growing up that this is kind of the path that I would end up taking. I will say the beginning of my teacher journey, without a doubt in my mind, was September 11th. Um, because I was a senior in college and I was going to Rutgers, which isn't very far as the bird flies from New York. So we had things like fighter jets flying over our college apartment on that morning. And I just remember feeling like there's so much I don't understand. It was a really rude wake up call. I hadn't studied a lot of history before that point. Um, I went into college thinking I'd be an art history major. I ended up being very uncomfortable in that major because there was a certain there was a certain art history attitude that made me uncomfortable. um, and a snobbery, if you will. I just felt very not, I don't know, I felt very awkward in those classes. Um, and then I just kind of stuck with religion because that's what was really fascinating to me. So on September 11th, I did feel a little bit validated because in college it had always been like, why would you study religion? And then September 11th happened, and this entire country had a crash course in Islam because it just wasn't part of the cultural conversation or understanding like at all back then. So I felt a little validated of like, this is why you study religion, so you can like understand things about your world. But when September 11th happened, I was like, maybe I'll minor in history because I had taken a history class to satisfy a graduation requirement the spring semester before. So when September 11th happened, I was taking some history classes with the idea of maybe I would minor in it. But when September 11th happened and I was just flooded with all of these questions, um, because in my mind, it didn't make sense that people would just do that for no reason, which was part of the narrative then. People wanted us to believe that like we were attacked for our freedoms. And like my brain just didn't think that like people worked that way. Like there had to be more going on. So it really started like a huge journey of self-education. So this is a long story, obviously, but a long story shorter, I ended up picking up history as a double major. And I had this whole final semester planned out. Series. I was on the 4.5 year plan. Do not feel bad if it takes you longer than 4 years. Like, do what you need to do. I probably could have gone longer. But I was on the 4.5 year plan, and I did a really good job of making like stuff for my majors and my core requirements kind of cross over. So I had some room. I had some room in my credits that I was like, I'm going to take ballet and I'm going to take theater appreciation. I think they had a floral arrangement course. Like, I mean, I was like, this is going to be like super fun last semester of college. And instead, I ended up pounding out a second major in history, taking classes like history of witchcraft and magic, history of the Crusades, like just trying to, history of Cuba, just trying to, fill in all of these holes I had in my knowledge. And I really don't think that that has stopped since then, to be honest. And I'm learning too with the autism, the idea of like special interest. And it's kind of really history has become my special interest. And it's what I've been really focused on really intensely since September 11th. So, like almost 20 years now of just where's the owner's manual of how the world works? Like, why doesn't anything make sense? Where's the owner's manual? So, me just trying to figure out, like, what is this world that I live in? So, that's how it eventually brought me to social studies, because going to high school in the 90s, we were still very much brought up on like baby boomer views of like what going to college did for you. Like, oh, you can major in religion, you can major in history, it shows that you have critical thinking skills and that you can like write and you can read, and like that's going to be good enough to get a good job. And now they want everything so specialized. So after I graduated, the invasion of Iraq happened. It was not, wartime's not a great time to find jobs for new graduates. So I just had a degree and I was working in like the service industry. I was pushing registers, I'm working in a restaurant. And I eventually was just kind of like, I don't know, maybe I should try substitute teaching. It's been there in the back of the mind. Why not? I'll try it. And I tried subbing, and then I just immediately fell in love with it. And I very clearly remember the moment when I was like, okay, I think this is what I want to do. And I was substitute teaching for an all-girls choir class, which means that obviously not much was happening, right? Like it was like, hey, you guys are supposed to read this and whatever. So I was just, kind of going around checking in on everyone. And I try to be friendly when I sub, I don't like being just the sub at the front of the room with a book reading. Like I try to check in and I remember at one point just sitting with this one student, and she just really started opening up to me about all this personal stuff really quickly. And I was almost kind of taken back by it. But then I don't know, I just reflected on it and of how like all I did was I just had to be like an older person who sat there and listened. And it just opened this person wide up. And I just realized kind of the power in the dynamic there. And I remember thinking like, well, I probably could have used someone when I was that age to listen to me too, you know? And that's when I really started falling in love with it. And I subbed for many, many years, which is honestly, I would always say if I could make a living off of full-time subbing, I would do that because it's a different dynamic with the kids. And I kind of thought that I might go into counseling at first, because I would always really like getting in-school suspension. We didn't have it at Knoll, but some schools, they have in-school suspension where they just make the kids sit in a room in the school all day and basically just be punished. So as a sub, I very often got put in the in-school suspension room. And I found that those were like some of my favorite days or my favorite class periods of being in there with those kids and being like, what'd you do? Like what happened? And just talking to them and getting to know them. And I think that what always really struck me was the response that I would get just from treating younger people with like dignity and not not condescension, just listening and treating them like a fellow person. And I just always really enjoyed it. And then I learned counseling was basically getting kids into college, which kind of wasn't what I wanted to do. And then right after that, I was like, okay, well, social studies. And I mean, I'm pretty confident I've said this to your class. It's just, I never wanted, I wanted to do what I could to help other people never feel as clueless and taken off guard and just the disillusion that came with 9/11. Because I definitely grew up with a lot of the like USA, you're really lucky to have been born here. This is the best place on earth, and very white centric social studies education growing up in the 90s. We weren't dealing with Common Core education back then. We were being asked to memorize dates and people and events, and that just did not work for me. Like I hated social studies in high school. Because I just was like, what's the point of all of this? Going to college and taking a women's history course and kind of learning for the first time that like women had done things, women had contributed. Like what? Huh? I didn't want. I wanted to do what I could to help other people just never feel that level of disillusionment. Like everything they had been told was just so incomplete at best, downright lies at worst. So yeah, I don't know. They say a lot of like the way you teach or the way you parent is a reflection of kind of how you view or how you wish to go back and treat yourself. And I think a lot of that fueled my decision to go into teaching, to try to be a person for kids that I needed, and also to try to give them the knowledge that I wish I had had to navigate the world better when things got really weird. So that's how. And back then, they used to still say things like, well, teaching, you're not going to make good money, but the benefits are good. We still believed that back then.
Yeah. Yeah, teaching is definitely something that just keeps coming back in and out. I'm like, should I not? All throughout high school, I kept going on and off. And I'm just like, why not? And I like how flexible you were with your life and how you gave yourself space. Um, because with me, I'm just like, I had to like figure out everything so I don't waste any time. I don't want to get a major and then not use it and go back to school to get a different major, a different degree. So I like that you're like flexible, but then you took time to learn and try things out before you found the thing that really sat with you. Um, yeah, because once I changed my major like 4 times before I even began the first semester. I remember when I was applying for colleges, they're like, okay, you can't change your major more than 4 times. And I was like, okay. I was like, okay, I'm a major in communications. Like, okay, I don't want to do communications. I want to major in biology. And I was like, okay, biology isn't for me either. Um, so I think that's something I could take is just being flexible. It's okay if I don't get it the right. I guess there's no right way to live life or expectations because I've been raised saying like there's a timeline. Um, and you kind of talked about it like being 40 and this weird space that you're in, where there's like younger people who might have more authority, but then you're also an authority figure. Um, I remember I had a conversation with my dad and he was like, I still don't see you as an adult even though you're 18. And I'm just like, yeah, I could tell. He still treats me old. Um, but then my sisters look up to me and they're like, oh, like you're so old. You're going to be 20 next year. That's so crazy. And I'm just like, 20, wow, no longer a teenager next year. It's my last year being a teen. But yeah, I've always felt this like expectation of this timeline that I have to follow. Um, and even though I just graduated high school, there's people like getting engaged, and I'm just like, this is happening way too fast. And I remember senior year just finding out people were getting pregnant. I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, just learning that there's no right way to move once you finish high school. There's no
There,
path.
there really, there really isn't. And I mean, the right way is the way that works best for you. That's what the right way is. Um, and in my personal experience, like life's kind of, if you are doing things in your life that you don't actually really want to be doing, or things that you're doing for other people and not you, or any, that catches up with you eventually. Like you can kind of only outrun your stuff so long, you know. So I completely hear you, you know, like that prepackaged thing. You might appreciate this story. I remember it was probably like around junior year of college, going back home, you know, so you've been out of high school for a little bit, but you're still in your college bubble. And you're being exposed to new things, but still very much in a bubble. And coming home, visiting my parents and going through my high school yearbook for like the first time since having graduated, and reading the little write-ups underneath the senior class, like what they had, you know, like favorite memories, you know, whatever, and future plans. So many students at 17, 18 years old had written future plans: college, job, marriage, kids, college, job, marriage, kids, college, job, marriage, kids. I mean, and it really, it struck me in that moment how many of us were just following something that had been laid out for us. Um, I mean, and let's be honest, like when you're an undergrad, you don't even finish college with your brain completely developed.
Mhm.
I don't feel like my brain really woke up until grad school, which I didn't go to until I was 27. And there, part of that has to do, like your brain is literally not finished forming before you're 25. You don't understand long-term consequences. Um, and this is exactly the age bracket that we're strapping with all this student loan debt. Like, hey, your brain is not fully developed and you don't understand long-term consequences, but we're going to tell you your whole life that you need college. You don't have the money for it. Here's some loans. Go ahead, sign. So there's predatory lending. Then there's like all the messages that get sent to young people about getting like, you know, obvious. I'm kind of bummed to hear the pressure hasn't gone away. You know, that you know, there's still that kind of that blueprint of you should be looking for a partner and you should, you know, build a family and you should have this career and all that stuff. And yeah, the blueprint has so much power, but there's a million billion different ways to live your life. And again, like what the right thing is the thing that works for you. Something that was something my stepdad told me when I was in high school that stuck with me, and I've appreciated in different ways as I've gotten older, is, you know, there's, back in the day, there's jobs you look for in the newspaper, you know. We don't really do that now, but there's jobs you look for in the newspaper, and then there's jobs that you end up kind of creating for yourself. I think Mama Bird is a perfect example of that. You know, like you're being creative, you're seizing something for yourself and saying, these are our skills and this is what we, you know, we're interested in and this is what we want to bring into the world. And you're seizing that. You didn't wait for something to pop up to make that happen. So I think that, yeah, like not asking for permission, realizing that life doesn't have to follow a blueprint. And also too, like just do it. Like you are what you pretend to be, you know? And which catches up with some people. Like if you're pretending to be something you really don't want to be, eventually you're going to be stuck in this situation of like, oh, I'm really not this thing and I don't like it, that I'm stuck with this kind of now. Or you could just be like, you know what? I am I am a documentary filmmaker, and I'm claiming that right now, and I'm just going to do it, and I'm not going to ask permission. And like that is not always the easiest path, but it's absolutely a path that's available. And it's absolutely a path that brings us more interesting things, I would say, than just kind of like the cubicle job, like going to the building and that of the company that you do one little thing that's part of the bigger machine and you don't even really know what it is. And then you go home and you can't even explain to your kids what you do all day. Like, like that's an option. If that works for some people, then great. Like some people are wired to just like want to go to work, make a paycheck, come home, and then have their life outside of that. And that's great. Like so many different things work for different people. The point of this is don't feel like the things that work for other people or the things that people feel like should work for them that they really don't, but they go along with anyway, and then end up with like a midlife crisis. That's not the only option, like, so just keep doing you, keep, doing what you're interested in, and you will attract those opportunities into your life. Again, like it's not always the easiest. Like my career hasn't been a traditional career trajectory. Um, it's not always easy, but I think probably the more interesting things in life aren't. So yeah, I have no doubts that whatever path you choose, and no matter how squiggly the path is, like as long as you're staying true to yourself, like you will be able to sleep better at night. And I was a communication major for like a semester too when I dropped it, so don't feel bad about that.
Yeah, it was crazy times. But yeah, I'm learning also what works for me now will not work for me later. Because I'm constantly changing. My interests are all over the place and sometimes it confuses people. And I'm just like, well, you know, I was talking to someone about it and they're like, well, maybe you don't have to do that forever. You could just do it for a little bit and then find something else and do that for a bit. So that's something also I'm trying to not beat myself up about because there's this like commitment thing. It's like, okay, you have to commit. And I'm just like, maybe I don't want to commit to something for the rest of my short life.
And
Which
sorry, go ahead, Sudie.
I was gonna say, which brings me to my next question about the healing journey. I think that's where it all started.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Learning about myself, and I'm just like, okay, all these other things, like this is what everyone else wants. And I know everybody believes in me, but it's time to do something that I want. And I think that took a lot of like healing from my want to please everyone. And like I want to desperately make sure that everyone else likes me, to desperately like be the good child, be the good person. And like there's a lot of problems in the world. I just want to be one less problem. Like I want to be something else. But then I'm just like, but then that's not fair for me because I'm telling myself that I don't deserve, you know, to have problems. I don't deserve to create conflict, and conflict is natural. And I've learned in my sociology class, conflict leads to growth between people as well.
Absolutely. Um, if I could like, yes, please let my life be a cautionary tale on this. Do not neglect yourself, your needs, your boundaries, because it will deplete you. And I feel like I am just now learning that in a real way of the old saying that you can't draw water from an empty well, and um, just some personal stuff. If you never Googled this term, it might be interesting to you, but um, parentification is when a child is given um, responsibilities, or like they can be like responsibilities around the house, they can be emotional responsibilities, but basically it's when a child loses part of their childhood because they're given adult responsibilities and jobs to do. um, and so I grew up in a household in which I was parentified in terms of serving the emotional needs of the adults around me, and not having my emotional needs really seen or grappled with or dealt with. So that can create a lot of people pleasing in your life, because you're just trying to keep everyone around you happy. Um, because if everyone's around you is happy, then it's like a more stable environment for you. It's just all self protection. Um, so I grew up with being parentified, and then I went into a profession teaching where, I mean, so much of, I don't know if industry is the right word, but so much of the teaching industry, the teaching world, the teaching culture is, well, you just got to do it for the kids, do it for the kids, do it for the kids. And feeling like you're failing, if you're not giving like every little bit of yourself. Um, so a lot of these things perfect stormed. I also dated a war veteran for a period of time. And that was a very unhealthy experience for me. But again, this idea of people pleasing, like empathy is very good to have, but endless empathy without boundaries for yourself is a recipe for self destruction. I am very good at being able to understand why someone might be treating me the way that they are. Something it took me 40 years, 41 years to figure out is that just because I can understand where that person's coming from, just because I can understand where their pain's coming from, just because I can understand where their frustration's coming from, doesn't mean that I have to subject myself to certain treatment. And that alone, I think, is life saving for me personally. And I'm really in a spot now where I do not have a fantastic sense of what does it mean to do things for myself, like just for me, for my own just well-being, or because like I like it, like I don't know how to spend money on myself besides like clothes so I can look put together in public, or like for teacher clothes. But like I don't know how to like, oh, there's this hobby I really want to pick up, but I'd have to like buy this, this, and this. Like starting to think of myself as like worthy of that investment. Like, no, like buy that thing for yourself so you can try, this thing that you think that you will like and, bring you comfort. Um, so please, like, I just, as a younger person, the sooner that you can feel like you have value, like you and your health alone has value, and you being, I'm not gonna say happy because like happy is too easy. Like that word gets thrown around a lot, but like you being a fulfilled person, you being a person that can put yourself first in order to keep yourself healthy, that is so important to learn. And I think it's hard for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. I think it can be especially hard for people that are socialized as girls and women, because there's a lot of caretaking that's assumed that goes with that position. Um, so yeah, so just being able to create those boundaries for yourself, and you start like I hate to also be the, breaking the bad news with this, but it does change your relationships. Um, there are people that are not going to respond well to you putting up boundaries and saying, hey, I know it used to be like this, but I can't continue that way, and this is what I need going forward. And if this is the way it's going to be, like, I can't continue, on this journey with you and in this relationship. And that's really hard. That's really hard for a lot of people. So I would say the younger you can get that stuff sorted, the better, because then you're just being more discerning with who you're bringing into your life. Because you're keeping your boundaries up, and if you're asserting, this is what I need to be a healthy person, this is the way my brain works, this is the way my body works, these are the needs that I have, and this is must be this a much of a decent person to ride the ride. Like, yeah, you set those boundaries for yourself. You might feel like it's hard to make connections with people, but then you'll start realizing the connections you do make, they're the better ones for you. It's really easy to be a people pleaser and like, she's so nice and she's so friendly, and have like 100 people like not really know you, but have good shallow things to say about you. And it's different to like stay true to yourself and try to be your healthiest person, and being like, oh, sometimes I can't do that, blah, blah, blah. And then people might drop away, but the people that stay are there really for you. I think the sooner anybody starts really kind of staying true to themselves and holding those boundaries and being honest with people about who they are and what they need, the sooner you're going to get more compatible people into your life. Um, and, the people that you have in your life are important. Your support networks. That's one thing that I've definitely has just definitely rung so true in the last couple of years, is like your support network's everything. And some people literally have no one, and then some people have support networks that like just barely keep their head above water, and then other people have support networks that like come right in and they get the whole situation worked out, and so we really do rely on other people more than the general ideology of this nation would like us to believe. Like, we need other people. And the person you need first is yourself. You're really going to be the only person you have from cradle to the grave, honestly. So many people come in and out of our lives. You are the only person you've got the whole time. So learning to love you and do right by you is so incredibly important. And it's not something that we're very much encouraged to do, So I encourage you to do that, Be true to yourself, and the people that you should have in your life will eventually show up.
Yeah, I've also noticed it's a long process to do that, to finally like choose you, because that was my thing 2021. I was like, this year I choose me, but then there were moments I was like, yeah, you know what, I've survived not choosing me before. I could just fall back. And it's kind of hard to start realizing when people are like using you, or people don't have the best intentions for you. Only recently I started noticing like the wording and things people say to me. I was having a conversation with a friend, and he was like, "You're very selfish for not like giving me all this attention you used to give me, and all these things." And I'm like, how does that like makes absolutely no sense. But then I was thinking, like, if this was 2020 me, that would have just flew right over my head. And I kind of started letting go of that. Then I was like, oh, he seems very sad. He's been posting very, very sad things. I need to like help him and heal him. Um, and then my friend was like, but that's not your job. This person could, like you said, just because you feel their pain, you know where they're coming from, doesn't necessarily mean you have to put yourself in that position to continue being hurt. And that's something I need to like get through my head. Um, but it takes time, and I'm try to be patient. But patience is something. Another thing I'm working on is like being patient with myself and my growth, because I'm not going to be like, I can't do a 180 overnight, even though I'd
Yeah.
wish to like wake up and be this person that I always wanted to be. It takes time to like get out the comfort zone and then meet new people and try new things and set those boundaries. But yeah, that's something I'm still working on. Is But I think the first step is realizing those things and those words, that you're not being treated well in that situation. Because before I was like, this person is like so awesome. They love me like there's no one else who loves me and adores me like this person. And then I'm like, this person isn't that great after all, even though I think I just fell in love with the idea of that person, or the potential, as people say. Um, but yeah, I'm just like, but I need more people like them. But it's like, it's okay to be alone. And that's the whole thing of 2021, is being alone, and so hard to be alone, alone with your thoughts. And during break, after my little breakup with my person, I was like, I have absolutely no one, and now I have to be alone with my thoughts, and I don't want to be alone with my thoughts. I'm not fun. I have no personality. Blah blah blah. And I was like, tried to change myself, and I was like, he left me because of this, so I'm going to blah 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 and change myself so that way the next person I'm with will like me more and never leave me. But I'm like, that's not how it works. Why would I want to be with someone who doesn't appreciate me for me? But it's something you have to constantly remind yourself, which is one of why I had that question about how do you maintain that process. Because it's not just you do it one day and then you're good and you're set. It's something that you constantly have to remind yourself of doing and practicing.
Um, I'm still working on that, to be honest with you. And again, like, let me be a cautionary tale of, for me, it literally got to the point where it became clear to me it was life or death. I had a major mental health emergency in 2016. I had another one in 2019. And it just became clear to me that if something didn't change, um, I might not, you know, I might not make it. And, it's a real reckoning. It's the invisible disability community uh, is a really great resource for this, because it's really hard for a lot of people to understand, like, just looking at me of like, no, I'm doing this because it's a life or death situation for me, but you don't see mental health, you don't see somebody's struggles. And so going back, it's like, you can't keep putting it off, because I'm telling you that from direct experience. You can't you please, God, do not wait until you get to the points that I have before provide that to yourself, that you claim that health, because it really is health. um, Before you claim that for yourself. I want to be a healthy person, because what happens is things compound. And one of the really interesting things about figuring out that I'm a neurodivergent individual and trying to parse that, okay, like, is this autism? Is this ADHD? Is this just trauma? Because it's really hard to pull those things apart. There's so many similarities. But one of the really powerful things for me was reading how neurodivergent autistic people have really high rates of suicide, much more than the general population. And one of the unique things about autistic folks is that their likelihood of dying by suicide does not go down with age. Most other brackets, it goes down with age, like you get older, this and that. But with, when you're a neurodivergent person, if you're an autistic person, the world doesn't really change around you all that much, and it just gets harder and harder. So things like complicated PTSD, things like trauma, they compound. And then, I think about things that I could do in my early 20s that then became like uncomfortable and like, I don't want to do it. Like in my 30s, that then became completely impossible for me, like in 2019. So you kind of be in a spot now where I can reflect on the last 20 some years. I mean, my last life, my entire life basically on top of that is just realizing that, yeah, the longer you put it off, like you're not doing yourself any favors, because then you're just collecting all of these more damaging experiences, or you're continuing to make the same mistakes of like allowing yourself to be treated a certain way in relationships, and like, I'll tell you, I mean, it's like the breakups for me have been really hard. And so there's the compounding trauma of having like romantic relationships that you think like, oh, this is going to be the one, this is the one that's going to work this time. And then it putters out. And like, I've never had a breakup that hasn't cost me money. It's a financial setback as well. So just the sooner you start being more true to yourself, it's gonna make your path a healthier path. And if you can learn to do that now, instead of when you're 40 or when you're 30, you're gonna save yourself some not great experiences probably, if you start that now, that practice. So again, I'm still learning, and I can't really give you like a time tested, like, oh, I'm a champ at this, I've been doing it a really long time. I can't really give you an answer like that. But I can give you the cautionary tale of do not neglect it, because you really can't outrun it. And the sooner you put yourself first, and people say that's selfish, like just ignore that. Like one of the most important things too, I would say, Yusura, that I've realized is like, don't let other people tell you who you are, and that's something that's messed with my mind so much my entire life, is just people telling me who I was, and especially too with the autism, of realizing now like, oh, my internal motivations and the way I sounded, I can understand like didn't match up with what this person was probably thinking, and I might have sounded this way to them or whatever, but they weren't actually like seeing who I was, and I feel like the people in my life who I'm the closest with have like, they see who I am, like we all have friends like that, like, oh, they're just like that, but like I love them, and so yeah, have more people in your life who see you, as opposed to who are willing to just jump to tell you who you are. If someone's willing to tell you who you are instead of ask you who you are, that's a sign, so I think also too, you're at an age to just be really discerning with who you let in. And that's not selfish of you. That's survival, honestly. And especially too, if you come from an experience where you're kind of used to being a caregiver, like I know that you've had responsibilities taking over, taking care of younger siblings and stuff, that caregiving can bleed over into romantic relationships. And your friend was absolutely right. That's not your job. That's not your job to be a caregiver for your partner. Your job is there to support them like on their journey, but you can't make anyone else do the work. You know, like you can try to inspire people by what you're doing. I mean, I think it always works better when you're not asking anyone to do something that you're not doing. You know, like, here's this thing that I already read. I'd like to share it with you. You know, here's this thing that this is practice I'm already doing. I would like to challenge you to do the same. You know, like, I'm going to therapy. Have you gone? Like, you know, that not asking people to do things that you're not already doing. So, yeah, don't let people tell you who you are. Um, you know who you are. I say that that's the big lesson that I've learned is like we know who we are, but we so many voices we let inside um, to tell us otherwise. And, you know, part of believing women is believing yourself. So, um, and there's a lot in society that's set up to make us feel like our feelings are too much, you know, or we're manipulative or this and that we're using our feeling. Oh, she's not really crying because for real reason, just like whatever, like all of these things add up. You know who you are, trust who you are, stay true to yourself, have those boundaries in place that keep you healthy. You know, it's not about like, oh, I just don't want to deal with you. It's like, no, for my own health, I need to have this boundary. And just be open and honest about your needs with people. And again, like what you're in this spot now where, you know, you're 20 and there's a huge range of sure maturity that you're dealing with. You know, you can have really mature 20-year-olds and you can have really immature. And I guess that doesn't change either. Same it's true in your 40s. But the moral of this interview, Sarah, is things do not change all that much. Um, but yeah, just stay true to yourself is my moral of the story. You know who you are. Keep those boundaries. Invite healthy people into your life. And if people aren't helping you on your journey of growth and they want to make you feel bad because they're not helping you be a better person, like that's on them. You know, that's on them. A lot of stuff, a lot of accusations are confessions. A lot of accusations are insecurities of that person, you know. So it's a skill to hear what people are really saying to you. You know, what has to do with you and what has to do with them, you know. So yeah, you're wonderful. And it's not your job to fix a man, okay? But let that be known.
Yeah, that kind of makes me want to connect back to kind of invalidating your emotions. I think as a woman, I've been taught a lot to like invalidate my own emotions. I got so used to like maybe I'm just crazy, maybe I'm just like overthinking it, maybe like all these signs that I'm seeing aren't actually there, and I'm just an insane person. And I think I also got that from my family and my parents. Again, with the emotions being too much. Um, in my family, I'm known as like the super emotional, sensitive type. So they're like, oh no, like don't raise your voice on Yusura, she's going to cry, or don't talk to Yusura this way, she's going to break down, or Yusura's taking so long to learn this new skill because she's so anxious and she's so emotional, or there goes Yusura again with that mood swing, she's mad again for absolutely no reason. So I think that has carried on where I invalidate my own emotions. Like I'm just like, oh, it's just a mood swing. Like, maybe how I'm feeling has nothing to do with the whole situation I'm in. Um, but I noticed once I started getting out of those situations and I started setting boundaries a little bit, that I actually feel so much better. I'm not sleeping 12 hours a day. I'm not constantly crying myself to sleep. I'm just like, I'm okay. And I would have been okay way much earlier if I didn't invalidate my emotions like I was taught to. So I kind of find that interesting how you kind of carry these things and you kind of start putting yourself in those boxes that people have put you in. And you just start doing those things.
I mean, it's a very rare, I feel like, um, as in our society and as a culture that um, we really help empower kids to learn who they are at a younger age. again, childless educator kind of strong opinion here, but it just feels like a lot of people have kids because of their own emotional needs, or it's the thing you're supposed to do and you just kind of do it, um, and don't really consider the responsibility of, like, one, you're bringing a being into this world who did not consent to be here. It's the ultimate like thing we didn't, none of us asked to be here, but we are. Um, and for me personally, I think there's a huge responsibility that comes with that. You're bringing a human being into this thing that we call existence, which can be really amazing and it can be terrifying, terrifyingly painful. And again, just kind of going back, children are the most invisible in society. And so we do grow up. I mean, parenting in a lot of ways is still very much like, well, they're my child. So I'm going to teach them the things that I want them to, I want to teach them, and they're going to believe the things I want them to believe and all of that stuff, as opposed to, hey, who are you, tiny human? Let's figure out who you are. That attitude towards parenting and that attitude within education is still very rare. Viewing children as already complete human beings that just need the space and the support to kind of figure it out. So a lot of teaching and a lot of parenting is indoctrination, basically. And yeah, we need to get back on that. And part of that, indoctrination is telling you who other people in the world are and telling you who you are, and also to telling you like what team you're supposed to be on, so it's, yeah, I think so many of us, whether or not we're aware of it or not, are carrying these voices in our heads that aren't our own. They start in our family, then they pick up in school, and then society at large, and then relationships you have, friendships you have, bosses that you have. Like we all carry voices that aren't our own, in our minds, and they can be positive, absolutely, but a lot of them can be really damaging, especially when they're conflicting with what you feel like is true for your own happiness and your own self. And that's the challenge, right, of standing up to those things. um, and just to zoom out and look at society at large, we're struggling with this. We're talking about this in our personal lives, but we can also see this in the world that we live in. We have this technology now where we can start commiserating with strangers in different parts of the country or the world and be like, wait a minute, I feel that way too. Oh, wait a minute, I've had that experience as well. And it chips away at that narrative of this is the one way to live your life, and or this is the menu, this is the small menu of options. The internet has given us access to like, whoa, there's so many more ways than I ever realized. And so as a culture, I feel like we're dealing with those voices that aren't ours as well. Like, what has patriarchy put in there, that makes me feel certain ways about myself and other people and about the way things should be? How is racism in there? How is ableism in there? Like sexism, just classism, ageism. How are all those voices in there? And are they really what I feel? And are those voices serving me? Are they making me a happier person? Are they making me a healthier person? Are they making my relationships healthier? Um, and for me, the answer has been for most of them, no, and I think that as a society, as a species, we're discovering ourselves in a new way. Um, and we're doing that individually at the same time. Like they're both connected. Us doing this individual work helps support the larger work, cultural work as well. So yeah, again, like the having people figure this out at 20 instead of 40 gives us 20 extra years of your life of being like a productive person, if that makes sense, you know. So like it's just this growth and this idea of like share what you've learned with others so that they can get on the path that they should be on quicker. Because when we're all doing our things that we're the best at, I really think that's when we can shine. You know, it's if we enable every person to fulfill like the potential they have as an individual, not just trying to fit people into boxes, like that's when we're really going to get to a special place, like in our individual lives and as a society, I think. I feel like that was a little babbly, but I'm sorry.
Totally fine. Yeah, I agree. Again, with the whole internalizing things, I think even with those things that you hear on the media and what other people say, you kind of take it in on yourself. I know people who have like internalized racism and they're like they hate themselves for being who they are because of other people. And sometimes I feel like it's hard to kind of distinguish, like, okay, which voice is my voice and which voice is a whole totally different person. And that's something I'm trying to figure out right now, is because like multiple people tell me to do multiple different things. And I'm like, okay, which voice that's going on in my head is something that I actually want to do. And it's something that am again, I'm trying to think of my intentions before I do something. I know last year when I did self-care or like healing, I did not do it so I could like grow and become a better person. I did it so that way I can not have anxiety attacks and panic attacks. So that way I have more time to do schoolwork and more time to, you know, be the perfect, not perfect, but a healthy human being, someone who people could worry less about. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take care of myself so no one else has to worry about taking care of me. Um, so I think that's also what led to my crash and burns here and there. But when I once I reframed my mindset, I'm like, okay, I'm taking care of myself because I care about myself and I want myself to grow. Um, it's not so that way I could do better in school. It's not so I can be a more effective team member. It's solely because I want to, and it's something I need. So I think that's something a lot of people need to kind of start learning is which voice is yours, and also like tension again. Why are you doing the things you are doing? Is it because you want to, or is it because you're being told? I know self-care has like grown a lot on the media. And that's why some people might do it. It's like, oh, everyone else is doing it. It's like a trend. So I'm going to also do it. So like it's good that people, you know, have these ideas like, yes, you should be taking care of yourself, but don't do it just because you feel pressured to. Do it because you truly care about yourself and you want better for yourself. If that makes sense.
And also too, like, let's get real about self-care. Like I feel like, you know, sometimes on social media it gets presented like, oh, self-care is just like throwing a bath bomb in the tub and, you know, like having a nice
Mhm.
bath and lighting some candles, and like that's all great. Like do it, you know, like whatever helps you relax. But self-care, like at least in my mind, it's like really hard internal work. um just like you might appreciate this story, sir. Like a few months ago I was trying to move like a huge bin down a flight of stairs, and I remember like moving it and I'm being like, oh, this is kind of heavy, and then I was like, maybe I should wait, and then I was going to do it anyway, and then I had the conscious thought in my head of like, your instincts just told you it's better to wait until you have help so you don't fall down the staircase, and you dismissed your instincts. Maybe you should think about that. And then like I like had to slow myself down of like, no, like your instincts are saying don't carry this down the stairs. I don't need to carry this down the stairs right now. Like, let's just wait. And that sounds ridiculously simple, but if you are in a habit of dismissing your inner instincts on things, which can often for a variety of reasons. Like having that moment of like, wait a minute, listen to what you're telling yourself. Excuse me. Listen to what you're telling yourself, like, and then doing it. That's like a big step. So, excuse me. But yeah, so like the self-care is not just like the fun frilly stuff. It's really being present with yourself, and sometimes the self-care is the crying yourself to bed at night because you're actually dealing with it instead of working to distract yourself, pouring yourself into helping someone else, things like that. Like sometimes the self-care is sitting with your own bullshit and really dealing with it when it doesn't feel good. Um, so yeah, there's inner work that doesn't necessarily show up on Instagram, I feel like. So don't, and I love to hear you say things like, I know I can't do this overnight. And you're absolutely right, and I saw this great like line graph, and it was basically showing like growth, but the ups and downs. And it was talking about like, don't forget to see that even if you're going down a little bit one day, that you're still on an upward trajectory, and so much for me personally of learning to be a healthier person has been not to overwhelm myself. Don't write a list that has 10 things on it that I'm not going to get done in a single day. And then I'll just use that list as a way to beat myself up and think about like, how come I just can't get all these phone calls and these emails and this thing done like all at once? Like breaking it into smaller pieces. Like, ooh, I accomplished that really important thing today. I did that phone call. I didn't cry on the phone call. And so that's great. And you know what? And I feel good. I'm going to stop there. Even though I have other phone calls I need to make, I'm going to make the next one I need to do tomorrow instead of piling on. And then it's like 2 hours later and you've done all these phone calls and then you feel like completely worn out. So learning to work with yourself, for me, learning to work with myself and not overwhelm myself, like not be my own worst enemy, has been really powerful. I know that I have internalized a lot of capitalism's messages, like always being productive, work hard. If you just work hard, like eventually something's going to work out. You always have to have like something to show for your time, like always accomplishing things, being involved in things and doing that. And maybe some people are wired for that. I am not. It's very common for me to start projects that I really love and never finish them. I'm learning that is very spectrumy, ADHD, like very common with autism type stuff. It doesn't mean that I didn't have a blast while I was doing it. And maybe one day I'll finish that thing. But like also too, you can just do things with your time that are fulfilling and rewarding. Give yourself permission to do that, especially if it's something creative. Like it doesn't have to be something you can sell on Etsy. It doesn't have to be something you are going to upload on the internet. Like you can literally just make things for you because it feels good and it brings you inner peace and whatever. It just makes you feel good. Like that's a good enough reason to do it. But we're so trained that we have to have like something grand to show for it. And it's not, just enjoy your life. Just enjoy your life. And do things because they make you feel good, and don't feel like you have to make money off of everything you do. And that everything you do, it has to be like the level of expert or the level of, master craftsman before you do it. Like just doing the thing has value. I don't remember, again, I'm losing myself on tangents, but.
No, I love everything you're saying. I can definitely connect back to what you're talking about, capitalism. I think that's also another thing that I'm currently working on. Being in college, I've met so many people who do so much. They're working full time, somehow getting good grades and also taking care of the family at the same time. I'm just like, I could barely keep my grades up and work a part-time job. And I'm trying to not compare myself to people because I'm like, I people might like it, but I do not like spending the rest of most of my days working, which also has been hard with Mama Bird because with Mama Bird we're kind of like on demand. So like I'd get a text from Park like, "Hey, can you do this like right now?" And then it's like, so that's something I'm learning to kind of do, and I've talked to Park about it. Like, hey, I just need time sometimes, like to, like if I say I will get something done, I'll get it done. I promise. But I'm trying to not. It's still hard because I want to like when I get an email, I want to respond right away and get an answer right away. And when I wake up, the first thing I do is like check my emails, check my calendars, see what I have to get done for the day. And I'm like, Yusura, you're not my like young me was working hard so that way I could have time and to do stuff. But it's looking like my future is just gonna be working all the time. And that's not what I signed up for. I did not sign up to work every single second that I am alive. And then connecting back to the whole, you don't need a reason to do anything to do something. Um, so that's also something my professor brought up of connecting back to religion, how people want to find out like our reason for being, like why are we alive, why are we on this earth? And she's like, why do we need a reason in the first place? Why can't we just live and enjoy what this thing is, even if it doesn't make sense? And then just like him, I'm like, yeah, why do I need a purpose for like every single thing? Why does there need to be a reason or an understanding? Why can't we just enjoy something for what it is? And I'm trying to take the same logic with my emotions. I saw that on the internet, a lot of people are questioning like their happiness and they're like, am I really happy or is it because blah, blah, blah? And then comments are like, why do you need to question your happiness? Why can't you just let it be? So that's something I'm trying to do, which is hard for me because I want to like find the answers to like everything. And I question like all my emotions and everything I do, but it's not necessary. Sometimes you could just be and that's enough.
I mean, it's like everything's about balance, right? So you are not a human being that is like a blind narcissist who thinks that they're right about, like that's not you at all. you know so yeah, there's no harm in like telling you of like, yeah, like listen to your internal self. Like if someone was like an over the top like narcissist personality who thought that they were like God's gift to everyone, like you don't tell that person that thing, but you are like so far from being that personality. um yeah, like just keep staying true to yourself. Like I mean, I feel like it's just little tiny examples. You start like, so when you sent me the questions the other night and I was like, hey, I think I'll need a day to like to digest this. Um, in the past, I would have felt like I had to be ready at noon the next day for you, but I probably would have woken up being completely overwhelmed and then felt like I needed to make some kind of like excuse to like reschedule with you and this and that. And like, and I just would have felt guilty the whole time about it, like, and felt like a horrible person. It's so much nicer to just be like, hey, that thing that we originally planned on, that time doesn't work for me anymore. Can we try this again? And you were just like, yeah, no problem. That works better for me. And then it's just like, I didn't have to carry any of that guilt. I just expressed what I needed, which was completely reasonable and rational. Like that's another thing, right? Is accepting that you are a reasonable person and what you're asking for is not over the top. Like when we get to a place where we think asking for basic accommodations or basic considerations is like too much, that's not a good spot to be in. So just that little tiny thing of like just now feeling like, okay, like Yusura is not going to be mad at me if I ask her if I can have an extra day on this. Like that's progress, and it's something that's so small and so little, but if you start doing that every day for yourself instead of participating in your own, in overwhelming yourself, right? Like the world's overwhelming enough. We got to learn to be kind to ourselves. So if you can just like every day, just like those little things of like, hey, I don't need to do this to myself. I can be nicer to myself right now. I can say the thing I really think or really feel right now. I can express what I really need. Especially with the people who are like safest to do that with, like start there. Um, yeah, and that will help, and that's going to help you find your voice inside. The more you stay true to yourself and the more you see it working, the more it's going to encourage you to do that. Like, oh wow, I feel better. I feel better that I just asked her if we could reschedule. I didn't have to feel guilty all day yesterday. So sometimes it's just real little invisible stuff like that. But yeah, you absolutely deserve it, and the younger you are when you can develop these habits, the better off you will be. And hopefully, like, it just kind of improves across the board generationally as well. I'm so inspired by you young women, and sometimes it's a bummer to hear that things haven't changed as much as like I would like to think that they have, you know. But it does seem like things are getting, progressing a little bit. And I'm so excited to see where someone like you is when they're 40, I'm just so excited for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could totally connect to you feeling guilty for stuff. I make promises and then at the moment I'm just like, yeah, this can work. And then time comes, I'm like, I can't do it. Um, and then, spend the rest of the day feeling really bad about myself. I'm like, wow, I never followed through. I'm such a horrible person. This person took their time and here I am. Um, when I could have just sent them an email, said, hey, I couldn't make it. Or hey, this won't work. Can we change things up? Um, it's still something I'm trying to learn to do, which is still hard because I'm just like, I have to make sure that everyone sees that I'm a very hardworking person. But it's like, that doesn't matter what everybody else thinks. As long as
And
I'm happy and content.
and like the fact that you're a hardworking person, like demonstrates itself on its own. Like being a hardworking person isn't necessarily like responding to that email right away. That's more of just like a time management thing. And in fact, sometimes like it's better not to respond right away. It's better to take in the information, think about it, digest it. We do have a culture that kind of has like this immediacy to it, which is not how like human beings were ever living before. Like we were in unprecedented times. We're living in a historical freak show. Like this is not, humans we did not evolve to have cell phones and be doing interviews over Zoom and stuff like that. So yeah, I forget where I was going with that, but yeah, just keeping the boundaries. I completely lost my train of thought.
Fine.
When I don't have power, you're seeing what I'm like when I don't have a PowerPoint with me to keep me on track.
But it's totally fine. I'm trying to be less organized because I feel like I'm less authentic when I'm organized. I'm just like, okay, let me just include all these things and then get it over with. And that's not it. Also being a robot, I feel like in school now I'm just a robot, just getting work things done and then turning it in. But I noticed that not all college students are robots, and it's really interesting during my student government meetings, before we start like, our agenda that with everything structured, people are like laughing with each other and being themselves. And then afterwards being able to like be in a formal setting. And then even if they have disagreements about certain opinions that are happening in the school, they're afterwards still be able to be like friends, which is like kind of a foreign concept to me. Because with the whole thing about work is like, okay, when you're at work, you have to be this person, you have to be like professional, get the work done, do what you have to do, and then you go home, and that's like two separate things. So it's interesting to see these people, my peers, coworkers, interact in that way. I think last week we went out to boba with social distancing. So it was kind of cool to how important human connection is, even in a really formal setting. And
Yeah.
I've learned that also in my sociology class about bureaucracy and this need to like improve efficiency through each other, and how we can actually do better work when we aren't overwhelming ourselves with these things that we have to do. So that's something I'm trying to teach myself is like you produce your best work when you're not having a list of things to do, crossing them off. Because I love learning. But once I got into college, remember my last semester, there were so many interesting topics and I loved all my classes. But at some point, I didn't even know what we're learning about and was just about making sure I get the assignment completed. But this semester, I'm trying to make sure I actually am paying attention and I'm doing it because, I'm in college because I love learning, and not for any other reason. And it's not about the grade. And I'm trying to like separate this, like the grade doesn't equal my value, which is hard coming from high school where I was like, oh, Yusura has straight A's, she's valedictorian, she's like blah 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 blah. And
Yes.
now I'm in a new environment. I'm just like, okay, I like these topics and I like to learn what we're doing, but it's hard to do that when I'm just seeing this as a potential grade. So I'm trying to like break that down, which is very hard to do, but I'll get there at some point.
So, I mean, here's like some lessons from the adult world and also from being a teacher side of it. It just, I don't know, if you're teaching long enough, you kind of realize that there's just like certain personalities out there. It's kind of funny because like my adult friends, I can be like, I know exactly what kind of student you'd be in my classroom and if we'd get along or not. So because like, people are people, and so just know that there are people who are incredibly overextended that we see from the outside and we're like, oh my God, how do they do all the things? Like, they're on this committee and they're doing that and they do volunteer work and they're doing this and blah, blah, blah. And it seems like they're doing everything. And then on top of it, like their eyebrows are perfect and like their nail, just like everything. You're like, who are you? But one thing I have realized as I get older is that there's a lot of people who are very overextended and it looks great on the surface, but the actual quality of the work behind the titles and all that stuff, it's not phenomenal, like it's just a lot. I mean, so much, I hate to say this, so much of the adult world is still like last minute, like crisis responding to things. And yeah, like I very much grew up with the like illusion that adults somehow arrive at this place and things are figured out. No, just know that's not the case. So there are people who are very talented at being overextended and making it all look good. And, even though if you kind of start getting into the details, the work's not so good. I feel like your personality, I mean, like you just said it, your own words, you're talking about like I'm here, I'm in school because I want to learn. That's way different. That's way different approach than I'm here to play the game. I'm here to pick up the major that's I know is going to for sure give me a job in this industry that pays this amount of money when I get out. And I'm going to do what I need to do to get the grades. But like, I mean, it's what I would always call academic bulimia. Like that's a thing. People just cramming and binging on information just to regurgitate it and then have no actual nutrients from it whatsoever. Like they didn't actually absorb it into their person. And that's not you, So I think it's good for you to be thinking about people use school for different goals. People use their jobs and their careers from different goals. And some people carve out very successful life paths for themselves, learning the right buzzwords, in all honesty, like having the right skin tone, like having the right amount of like money from your family, like all of that stuff, and very good at like making things like look good on the surface. Um, but you try to have a conversation with them for more than 20 minutes and it doesn't go as deep as you might think it would, or something like that. And where, I mean, honestly, like some of the most brilliant people I have known in this world struggle the most. I'll just be honest. Um, so yeah, just be aware of, like you said, what your intentions are. Your intention is to actually learn and get the most out of this material. And I relate to you talking about, you know, having all these different interests that are all over the place. And I would say that is phenomenal. Do not feel like you need to sacrifice any of those, because you're going to start getting to a point, and you probably have already have had this experience where like you're learning something in one class and then it connects to another class and you're like, oh, wait a minute. And you start getting excited about these connections. I mean, that doesn't end. So keep your interest broad, because you will be fascinated how this thing, you're interested in biology and you're also interested in art and you're also interested in comparative religion and you're also interested in education. And wait a minute, here's how all these things actually like link together and cross over, and how I learned this thing from here that applies to here, and just keep that going. Some people like, they just get the diploma and they don't even bother really trying intellectually challenging themselves ever again. I mean, I always take stuff with this with a grain of salt, but like, you always see like these studies that come out, like whatever percentage of people never read a book again after graduating high school. You know, like I haven't gone deep into how they're actually getting these numbers, but they never look good. You know, it's always a scary high percentage. Keep on your path. You know what you're doing. You're there for the actual knowledge. Not everyone is. Some people are just there just for, like we said, you know, that blueprint. They're fulfilling the blueprint. They're not actually on a deeper journey of trying to figure things out. And that's okay. Let them do what they do. That's not for you to take on, as in like you're failing, you know. In all honesty, you'll be more interesting later in life. So yeah, keep your diverse interest. You know, that's great. Study what you, yeah, because this is a thing too. Like we conflate education with getting a job, and they're not the same. They're really not. And it feels to me that you're a person that's not just going through life to get the job and do that thing. Like you're actually here trying to learn stuff about what it is that's going on here. And keep with that, because we need people like that. You know, we need thinking people. And it will get easier as you get older, especially too, because like 20 something priorities get kind of weird. Like people start partying and people start, you know, getting obsessed with like making sure they're seen here, or they're doing the, you know, just, you know, the priorities can get wonky in your 20s. So I have found that there's a lot of things about me that made me very not cool when I was younger, that now that I'm older, people are like, oh, wow, that's fascinating. So people change and they grow up, you know, and sometimes you're ahead of the curve. You know, being ahead of the curve is never easy, you know, because especially too, like you'll have people telling you how dumb you are when you're like actually having foresight, you know. So again, finding that inner voice, knowing who you are, will go far. Hi, puppies. The dog.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm trying my best not to think too much about it. I'm like, okay, everybody has a different mission, a different goal, and mine's look different. And sometimes it's hard to like remind yourself, okay, this is why I'm here. I'm not here for these other things. I'm here for this one thing. This one thing is to learn about these things. And definitely, yeah, I always see the connections between all my classes, even though they seem like nothing the same. I'm taking a human evolution class and then a class on love and marriage and family. And somehow I was able to make a connection between human, like biological human evolution and, family and love and all this stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I always get so excited when I'm reading these things. Um, and sometimes like the work seems overwhelming, but like once there's a certain topic and then I read about it and then I'm just like, this essay, 8 pages, no problem. But from far as like, oh, I have to write multiple different essays, all on these different topics. And then like, oh my gosh, I want good quality work. I have to make sure I get this and this in, and then I forget about the whole content. And but yeah, I I love to learn, and I hope I keep that because life will be boring to me personally, if I'm not learning something new. There's so many interesting things to learn. And a question that we haven't touched on is why move to Colorado from Jersey? I know that's like a big change in life, and that's something I'm thinking about doing later on is moving somewhere else for a new scenery. I just want to know why you chose Colorado.
Why I chose Colorado? Multiple reasons. When I came back from living in Korea and I was in New Jersey, I just knew New Jersey wasn't like the right fit for me. It's very rat race, go, go, go. So I knew I wanted to be somewhere like more laid back than the Northeast. 300 days of sunshine sounded really great. Especially too, I had experienced a couple like polar vortex winters out in Jersey, which was just horrendous. I mean, just winter on the East Coast is terrible. And I think I definitely have like seasonal depression type stuff. When the sun goes away for a long time, it gives me the big sads. So there was that sunshine, and I wanted to be closer to nature. And outside of Colorado, there's very much this impression that since marijuana was legalized in Colorado, everything in education got fixed, like education got funded, which when you get here and you start working for the school system in Colorado, you very quickly realize that that's not the case. So I will say I did fall for some of like the misinformation, and like I won't lie, like DPS, Denver Public Schools, they have a really beautiful website that makes it seem like all of these great things are happening. So it was a good experience of the way policy can sound on paper, the way versus the way people are forced to live out that policy and the difference in it. But yeah, I mean, Denver Public Schools is, I think it was the fastest growing urban school district in the country. So it just seemed like there was opportunity, there's opportunity, there's sunshine. Kind of why not? I guess I had come out here to visit and I liked it. So I had kind of had like a small little group of cities I was thinking about, and Denver was the one that won out. Which, like in terms of coming here to work for DPS, that was, I always make the joke that like DPS broke me. It was like finally the final thing that broke me, my teaching career. But that being said, like I never would change it because I feel like I had a very non-traditional career path as a teacher. Like a lot of teachers, like they graduate, they find their job, and then they just try to stay there and get tenured and like don't go anywhere for 20 years or whatever. And that changes a little bit. Not everyone does that anymore, but I've been all over the place. Like I've tried to get into as many schools as I can, like just subbing. I've taught abroad, I've taught in multiple, taught in schools in Jersey, and then I've taught in Denver. So the actual teaching structure is not set up to have educators have a career like that. Your pensions don't transfer, things like that. And you absolutely should. You want traveled teachers that have experienced life, But yeah, so a big draw of it was Denver Public Schools and the sunshine, as boring as that answer might be.
I don't think that's boring, but yeah, that's good reasons. I have not left Colorado and like forever. So hopefully maybe this year, maybe next year, probably not this year because of COVID, but I want to see somewhere else. But Colorado just seems like a good place. I don't know. Learning about other states, I'm just like, Colorado isn't as bad as, the people, like my classmates. I remember in high school, everybody's like, I'm going to leave Colorado once I move out. I'm going to move as far as I can from Montbello. But, Colorado compared to other states at the moment, it sounds pretty good.
And I'll, again, like some tips from adulthood, like I am not a person that really knows what it's like to be settled. I've moved around a lot, starting in childhood and then up into my adult years. I mean, I haven't known what it's like to really be settled and planted in a place. So that being said, like going back to New Jersey this past year for like 6 months, I did appreciate it in a new way, like getting out of town and coming back. Because one thing I'm starting to get to a point, I've moved around so much and I've been to different places. It's like, places are just kind of places, like it's just a matter of finding your people. I mean, the actual physical environment, I would say, is like worth thinking about more. Like, what kind do you want to be near the ocean? Do you not want to be near the ocean? Like that, what kind of weather? As I get older, do you want to experience winter? Like just the actual physical environment. But like you'll find people, and just because the city is really bustling and has a lot of stuff going on doesn't mean that you're going to find your people there, or but I think that goes into what we were talking about earlier, just like it's easier to find your people like when you know who you are and you're true to yourself and you communicate that, but getting out of town is good. There's a lot to learn, but also too, like, more things change, the more they're the same. I do think though, I won't lie, I have thought that so many of my Knoll students, I'm like, God, they should go to Rutgers. They would love Rutgers. I just feel like it would a lot, like there's just, Colorado's great, but there's a real lack of diversity here that I think that the East Coast has and parts of the South and stuff have as well, where I think like in some ways that could be beneficial to some of you getting out of here in that way.
So interesting now that we graduated to see where everyone is at. I remember the senior year was so bad for everyone. It was not what we expected. Not even like with COVID. I think it was just I feel like our class we weren't really looked at until like senior year, and then all of a sudden, I think it was, second semester, it's like, oh, you can't graduate without applying to these scholarships, and people did not know they had to apply to scholarships in order to graduate. No one knew what was going on. And then most of us, we wanted to go to college, but couldn't get the funding. But there were like so many opportunities that the school was offering. I got a scholarship like specifically for NCIS and DCIS students that many of us did not know about. And I was like, I don't know. Yeah. It's interesting to see where everyone's at. I know a lot of people like dropped out and then transferred, and I think we're just slowly figuring out what we're doing, and it's kind of nice to see everyone else start picking themselves up and finding their own thing. But yeah, it was definitely scary. I was like, I don't know what everyone else is going to do, and I want to make sure that we're okay. But for the most part, I think, well, no, being an honors student at NCIS, going from a small school, you end up being in the same class with the same 10 students. So it was interesting at graduation, like hearing names called up, haven't heard before. And I was like, oh, you're in our class. I thought you were like a junior or like a sophomore. But yeah, I don't know what the majority of my class is doing, but I know those same 10, 15 students that I've had in my honors and AP classes since 9th grade, they're, figuring it out, which is nice to hear.
I'll tell you, like one thing as a teacher who has worked at multiple schools and in different buildings, that so frustrating and heartbreaking and infuriating was just, it's like one thing to read about inequities in education. It's another to be like, oh, when I worked in this school, we had this, and now I'm in this school and we don't have like anything close to that, you know, and just how underserved you all were. And just to, in my imagination, being able to like pluck all of you out and imagine you in a different school with different resources and different, you know, services around you, and just being like, these kids are already amazing. What if they had these resources? And it was just, it's just heartbreaking. And what you all went through too with like your teacher turnover, right? Talking about those internal struggles, you know, the hardest part is always leaving the kids, you know, like you feel bad. You're like, I don't want to leave the kids. But in my mind, it eventually becomes like, that's always going to be the reason why you don't want to leave. So because that's always the reason, it's not a reason, if that makes sense. Like, that's always going to be a reason to not leave. So because it is, it doesn't count anymore. And I think you guys saw this pretty well. I mean, I was getting headaches all the time. Like I was getting to the point of like, I was physically ill from just the stress of it all. And part of that stress is also too, just seeing people who deserve so much more and so much better not get what they should have, you know, and just being like, yeah, so that's just, it was something that was really hard about the move out here and the experience of coming to Colorado and Denver, but something that was really personally powerful, and it just cements all these things that you know academically. It's like I said, it's one thing to read it, and it's another thing to see it in your own like life about like kids you end up caring about, you know. And so it's just, this all started just to hear that you guys weren't getting the information that you needed. It's just another example of these setbacks totally beyond your control that have been, I mean, these things that have been put in front of you, you know, and it's just, imagine every kid getting the world-class education that they deserve and the real opportunities. Where would we be? You know, like I just think about like this amazing stuff that you're already doing. What it would have been like if you had access to like a studio, like Carrie Cullen now, like we did at Jefferson, you know, where Carrie goes to college and she meets all these kids who grew up with like even more than what she had, you know, and she thinks that what she had access to was not comparable to what other kids have. So just to see all the different layers, you know, and we like to pretend that education's this great equalizer, but we actually haven't allowed it to do that yet. There's nothing about it. We don't provide equal education. So it can't be the great equalizer until we provide equal education. And so you're doing so many amazing things and you have done so much, and just know that you're doing more than most with less. And give yourself grace with that. You are accomplishing so much. You are in the same room as other people that have had more given to them, or they just haven't had to deal with certain things. You know, you're still in that room. So give yourself grace for that. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, that's something I'm constantly thinking about is, again, education. I think education is like a really big key role into where society goes. So that's always in the back of my mind. Is like I want to do something with education. As you can tell, my room got gradually darker throughout this meeting. I'm using my natural light, which is now kind of starting to go away because, you know, sun is setting. But I want to thank you for this interview. I've learned a lot, and it was nice catching up with you.
It was nice catching up with you too. And like reach out anytime, and whatever you need, I'm here. And then eventually when I get to a spot, I was thinking like before I go to grad school, like I would like to actually like hire you guys and like do one of the things that like you guys do. I think that would be like really awesome. But in the meantime, if I can like support any projects, or like if you ever just need anyone to chat to, like I'm here. Okay. So just know that.
Thank
All
you.
right.
I appreciate you.
Appreciate you. Keep doing what you're doing.
Bye.